Councillors, I reconvene the hearing, and I had on my list Cara Thorpe at 3:20 and Hayley Harrison at 3:30 and Michael Hanneran at 3:40. Michael Hanneran has arrived and has agreed that we hear his submission now, if that's in order with everyone. And his submission in our big book is on page 112, 112. And I invite Michael to come turn on the speaker system on the right-hand button. And apparently the appropriate distance is one open hand like this, Michael, and you will be heard by everyone. So the floor is yours, Michael, when you are ready to proceed. Thank you for coming.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My first comment is that I would like to congratulate the Council on taking this initiative and preparing this plan. Looking from the outside in, I get the impression that over the years the Domain has been an easy target for cost cutting at budget time, and it does look a bit ragged around the edges. I drove up Walnut Avenue today, and I certainly thought that in various spots on the way up Walnut Avenue. Just going through the submission in the order that things are there. On the question of the bowling club in the central hub, as I say, I've got some mixed feelings about it. I acknowledge that the club has always been there, and I have in my photo album here some early 1900s postcards of the bowling club. However, in more recent times they've surrounded themselves with a big fence. I find it somewhat cynical that the staff comment in your book in relation to a submission from the croquet club wanting to put in a hedge. The comment was that you have to preserve the open views, and yet the bowling club is allowed to totally enclose itself with corrugated iron and buildings. At least hockey and tennis have fences that you can see the action through them. The other one I've made a comment there is the PA. When I was working at the museum, I used to wander over to the Rose Garden to have my lunch on a fine day, and quite often I was woken up by the by the PA system from over the fence, blasting out a fresh announcement. And I think that is, must be a way of keeping that within the boundary. The Heritage Trail, I like the idea of it, and I suggested the possibility of producing a map. That's the map of the very old one now, the Christchurch Botanic Gardens, on which all the notable trees are marked, all the memorials are marked, and a lot of other stuff as well, and you did have to buy it. It was not a giveaway. I don't know if they still do that. From the heritage point of view, once again flicking through the submissions this morning, I noticed one from cricket on the pond around the oval. I'm quite strong on that whole waterway. Robert Park's first map of Ashburton in 1858 that I used to have on the wall of my office in the museum showed that lake exactly as it is today, complete with the island that's in it. But it was fed from a totally different source. I'm quite happy to acknowledge that. It's had a couple of dams put across it in two places to create actual lakes instead of just a stream, but it is still the original feature of that area of the town. It's not an artificial pond. The next one down, the timeline. I've just simply said that most of them there aren't staying to 2028. I don't know how many of you will be around the table in 2028, but I've seen a lot of councils over the years come and go, and every time there's a new annual plan or a long-term plan done, projects change. And I just wonder how much of what you decide on out of this exercise will still be there in 2028. My comment there is find a way of doing it now. If the government can come up with the money that's going to find temporary employment for 30 people building a racecourse, they might be able to find the money for this that's probably going to provide some long-term employment as well as the temporary employment. On to the main things. Number one, the pigeons. I'm involved with the maintenance of one major building in the town, and we've spent a fortune trying to get rid of pigeons with spikes and electronic devices, and we've been partially successful. No media. The Plunket Society in...
We're on the...
Oh, right. Okay, I've said it now. The Plunket Society in Cameron Street recently had a major flood because the pigeons, in the last rain, the pigeons had blocked the gutters of their building. And you'd be well aware of what happens at the event centre. But the problem is these flying rats are being bred by the council in the domain and in the cemetery. Once again, when I was at the museum, middle of the afternoon, it wasn't uncommon to see flocks of 200 to 500 of them flying out of the domain. And there's two areas I can think of, one off Park Lane and one off the Will Street corner, where the paths are just inches deep in pigeon muck at certain times of the year. And it's getting worse. I walked right up Walnut Avenue recently, pigeons in all the trees up Walnut Avenue. Along the back drive from Elizabeth Street, there's nothing but pigeon noise and pigeon droppings under the trees. So I really think it's time the council closed the domain for a week or a fortnight in some way and had a major shoot or a major poisoning exercise. I know you put in some effort in about 5 or 6 years ago into trapping them on some of the high buildings around the town. That was absolutely futile. There needs to be something more aggressive done to get rid of them. If they can do it in London by bringing in hawks at 8 o'clock in the morning for half an hour, they can do it on the vineyards in Marlborough. There must be something that can be done here. My next brilliant idea was round about where I live. There is a lot of unusual fruit being grown. Not unusual per se, but unusual for Ashburton. The domain used to have 3 medlar trees. They were heavy cropping trees. They weren't very old. David Askin put them in when he came here. They were sacrificed to extend the croquet greens. That's one type of fruit. Round the corner from me, there's 2 pomegranate trees. Not a brilliant crop this year, but last year I was able to wander along the footpath and just help myself to 2 or 3. I've got guavas, cherry guavas growing. The next door section to me has been recently cleared, but before it was cleared, it had kiwi fruit growing there. I picked the last kiwi fruit off it before they were bulldozed. If this meeting had been held when it was meant to be held originally, I would have been able to bring a bag of guavas along for you. I really think some of that type of fruit growing in an area in the domain with boards on how to deal with it. The medlars, if you're going to use them, they take special. You've got to let them fall off the tree and start to rot before you use them, before you turn them into jelly. But there was a lady in Christchurch, a general practitioner in Christchurch, who is secretary of the Burke's Pass Heritage Trust, which I'm a member of, and she has medlar trees growing at Burke's Pass, makes jelly and finances all the maintenance on the little church down there out of selling this jelly. So So that was just one idea. There's also grapefruit growing just around the corner from my place. It's a 70-year-old tree and it's a heavy cropper. I was responsible for removing every grapefruit on it about 9 months ago, and it's absolutely loaded again now. Quinces and olives. There's olives growing just around the corner. In fact, I think there may be some olives in the domain. I know David did plant some once. And my third comment was the aviary. I wandered through it the other day, and there's a lack of explanation as to what's there. It doesn't look the tidiest thing in the world. I understand that if you can have peacocks there, your area has to be untidy. I understand that. But I think you've either got to have an aviary that's got a focus, like caring for rescued birds or breeding rare birds or something like that, conservation, and it's got to be well kept, well maintained, and very educational, or don't have one. Could be the ideal spot for my fruit garden. So that's all I've got, people.
Well, councillors, questions of Mr. Hanneran? Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm
sorry. Councillor McMillan.
I was quicker.
You were quicker.
Quicker at turning the light on. Thank you for your submission. I was just going to ask, with the bowling club, if some of the fences were either hedges or they weren't it wasn't so blocked in, do you think then it would be worthwhile keeping the club in that position?
Yeah, I do. The original photos show it had a chain link fence around it. Well, even prior to that, it had no fence. It had a bank with gardens on the bank. And I understand today you have to close things in, although the Croquet Club have had a lot of trouble recently because they're not. And the council's made a very good job recently putting a fence up Phillip Street that may just keep the idiots out. But yeah, I've got no objection to the bowling club being there. It's just I think they're a little, almost a little commune locked away there that people don't really know what's going on, whereas if you wander past the hockey or tennis or croquet, you do see what's going on.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, Michael, for your submission. The pigeons, you talked about hawks. So what do the hawks do to the pigeons?
Frighten them.
So they'll just move them somewhere else?
Yeah. In Marlborough, they just use the common hawks, and they have them. You know, they're tame ones. They've got a man, falconer. But in London and Trafalgar Square, they bring a falcon. One man, one falcon in the morning, and he seems to be able to get rid of them for the day. And I've seen a photo recently of Trafalgar Square in 1954, I think it was, where people couldn't walk for the pigeons, but like Pigeon Park in Wellington. And nowadays, I've been in Trafalgar Square in recent times, and there's the odd pigeon there, but virtually none. And there's one cathedral in England, Exeter I think it is, where they've actually built artificial nests for falcons on the roof. And these birds roost there and there's no more pigeons no more.
But they'll be somewhere else.
They'll be somewhere else, yeah. But they won't be somewhere else if they're shot or poisoned.
Okay. Councillor Rawlinson, you be careful that you're not done away with between the domain and Brown's cowshed.
No.
Councillor Rawlinson.
My question, Nork, as a comment really, was this morning regarding the bowling and visibility in. I mean, I've seen the fence around it, but we were told this morning that they've had people on the outside. They must be looking, there must be somewhere they can stand and look over, who've then come in and been offered to have a roll up and a game of bowls to try it out. So there must be a point there.
Yes, I think round by the club rooms on the car park side, there's an area where they keep a big heap of soil and that sort of thing, and I think you can look over there.
Yeah.
And that is another point I noted in the other people's submissions, was the amount of car parking that is taken up, they are the only group that actually parks in the domain at the moment. Hockey and croquet and tennis do not.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hanneran, for coming in. Do we have a Hayley Harrison or a Cara Thorpe or a Vernon Wallace present? Vernon, would you like to come forward and give your submission now? Councillors, Vernon's submission is on page 269.
Good afternoon. Wasn't sure if I was going to come today, but I thought someone from the domain should come. I can't remember a lot of what I put in my submission, but I think I can remember the main points. Regarding the bowling club, I am there every day, 5, often 7 times a week, because I run the nursery and have to check on my plants. There is, I've put in there about them speeding, a few of them. They do. It's not just the bowling club, a lot of them. I think we need more speed restrictions in there. There's supposed to be a 10km/h speed limit, but I'll often see them going 30, 40 kilometres an hour up there. For a private club that can serve alcohol, I think it's a very dangerous thing, and I'm surprised that there hasn't been an accident. We do not want to get rid of the bowling club, but we would like them to be moved to the area with all the other clubs. It is the heart of the domain where they are. It's right by the car park, right where the playground is. I have been there for over 8 years, and a lot of people have come up to me and asked why the cafe isn't open, not realising it's a private club, and they look at me with surprise that there is a private club in the domain for members only. Another part of my submission was when putting the lighting in to get security cameras. We get a lot of vandalism in there. We had quite a few bad weekends just recently. The toilets by the playgrounds were set alight, causing tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but regarding the previous person talking with the pigeons and the falcons, we have had native falcons and hawks come in there. We had to get one of them put down because it was damaged by someone throwing a stone at it, is what the vets have said. So we would love that to happen, but it is the public, I'm not sure, would be as forgiving on them. That's really all I thought I'd come to say. I'm sorry, I can't exactly remember what my rest of my submission was, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just to clarify, I think I was first. Just to clarify, Vernon, in your opening statement you said, am I correct, we would like to move the bowling club, or should it be Should be
I would like to. I would think it would make more sense for all the sports clubs to be in one area.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Councillor Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned you have had falcons and hawks there before.
Yes.
Did they just come naturally?
They just came naturally.
And somebody, this was what, the New Zealand falcon or
I believe it
New
was.
Zealand native
I
falcon?
believe it was the native.
Oh, right. Okay.
I wasn't the one to take it to the vets that had to get it put down, but when I came back, they said it was the New Zealand.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. Thank you.
This was about 5 years ago that happened.
Plenty of tucker from there now.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you for your submission. I just want to talk about lighting. You've got the improved lighting. Do
Yes.
you mean more lighting or brighter lights or more?
A lot of the lights there now are quite dull, and the light posts themselves have been damaged or hit by vehicles or just youths being silly buggers.
Where is that?
This
Sorry to
is
interrupt.
along it's called the Creek Road track. It goes from the top of the car park along to Creek Road. There's one quite badly damaged one there, but a lot of the the lights get broken. I'm not sure if that's just from storms or from people throwing stones. But also the trees grow over them, so it blocks the light, and in the evenings it is quite dangerous to walk there. But I believe I put in there to put in security cameras when that is going in. I think that would just make sense and cut down a lot of the vandalism and destruction in the domain.
Thank you. Just one more question. When you're working in the domain, like 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon or whatever in the winter, is it bright enough to see, or how do you manage that?
We finish at about 4:30, so I'm not
Okay.
generally not there.
Yeah.
But in the middle of winter, it's normally getting quite dark.
Okay,
Then, yeah.
sure.
Councillor Brahm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will get the mic in front of my face,
Good
about
man.
the hand away, and everyone should be able to hear me. Thanks, Fern. It's really good to hear from someone who works in the domain. I'm really impressed that you're brave enough to do that, because not many people do it. The main question I've got is the vandalism in the domain happens normally at night. Do you guys close the gates? Can you close the gates?
I believe that was also part of my position as submission, as to have blocking the gates or entrances off at night. No, it's completely
Doesn't-
open. At the end of the car park, that is closed off. But there are plenty of ways you can get in there if you really want to.
Yeah, but if you stop the cars for a start, so West Street and whatever else they come from, that might take a lot of vandalism out, because they have to walk in.
It would take some out. I don't think it would take all of it out.
Oh, no, you won't.
Or probably even most of it, but I think a lot of it, or some of it, would be taken out.
Thank you.
Just make it more awkward for them to get there, anyway.
Okay, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow on from Carolyn's question about you were saying about the security cameras needed for the people who are walking back to Creek Road. But if you had the new entrance road or coming in from Walnut Avenue, do you think they would then walk along that way instead of, so that would kind of sort out that problem?
That would be nice. I'm not sure when that would happen, but I'm talking more of a interim until that happens. And there are lots of other places, like near all the toilets is where the main vandalism occurs. So just around those sorts of areas, I think security cameras would be a good idea.
Okay. Councillor Lovett.
I was just thinking of the lighting in there, or the lack of it. Are people safe? You know, women walking through the park, you know, sort of.
I think as safe as anywhere really at the moment. I personally probably wouldn't do it myself in the weekends and that late at night, but I think just in the early evenings until reasonably late, I'd feel reasonably safe going there. But
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. Just going back to the subject of a gate, so would you see one being on that West Street entrance in?
the main entrance and every drive entrance, I think.
Because listening to Councillor Brown reminded me, we're both on the Tynwald Reserve Board, that the gates now are locked there at 8 o'clock, and that has made, in the evening, the caretaker luckily is there to lock them, but that has made a reduction in vandalism, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, I think blocking off the car parks at
Yeah.
around 8:30, 9 o'clock would be a great idea.
Thanks.
Mr Mayor.
Thanks. Vernon, we have security patrols, or we used to have security patrols at the domain. That still happens, and is it effective?
They are there. They normally rely on us calling them if anything happens. I'm not sure how often they check it at night on the weekends. The vandalism still occurs, whether they're patrolling or not.
So, supplementary, so if you had cameras, will it stop the vandalism?
I'd hope it would. Would hopefully be able to at least identify who was doing it. I don't think anything is going to stop the vandalism completely, but just reducing it more would be helpful. I believe about 2 or 3 weekends ago there were 7 cases of vandalism in the one weekend. So I think cameras would have prevented a lot of that.
Thank you.
Very good. Further questions? Vernon, thank you very much for coming along. The situation, it was probably a very brave thing for you to do as an employee of the
Yes, I thought someone
domain,
should come from there.
but as far as I'm concerned, I think the councillors are concerned. It's been much appreciated. So thank you
very much.
Thank you. Councillors, Cara Thorpe has not arrived, Hayley Harrison has not arrived, and Edith Smith is due at 4 p.m. 5 minute break, or break until Edith Smith arrives, I think, is in order. I'm sorry to those who are trying to watch us switch on and off, but please be patient. Thank you, Mr. Chief Executive. Welcome everyone back to
We have a museum on West Street and a Plains Museum at Tynwald that show the social and agricultural history. Nowhere is Indigenous biodiversity history promoted. This plan is the best opportunity we have had in 150 years to draw attention to what was lost and showcase the significance of Indigenous biodiversity in our district. People from everywhere visit the domain as it's in a strategic place on State Highway 1. This is the time to show how our native biodiversity evolved on our dry, free-draining habitat and also create wetland areas to remind people of the widespread and ongoing loss of these ecosystems. It could also feature our beautiful foothills vegetation. Visitors like to identify with special features of the place that they are visiting, and this is missing from the plan. Page 12, Features and Views. The domain currently celebrates other countries' biodiversities with many varieties of exotic trees. One must search for native tree specimens among the established plantings in the domain, as there are so few. And in fact, Val Clemens and I were helping out with holiday activities. We have a focus on native vegetation, and that was our little challenge for the children. And we actually had to look around quite a bit to find the totara and a rimu hidden among the other conifers. If totara and kahakatea or matai had been planted many years ago, just imagine how different the domain would be today. The design theme. Nature seems to be regarded as a cultivated botanical collection. It is of concern that the native or indigenous vegetation is relegated to the wild area on the island. Now is the time to focus on promoting our native biodiversity to the visiting public. The idea of a sequential garden with an interesting random design, including winding pathways, innovative, attractive and informative signage is timely. There could be interactive challenges added to learn about plants and where they are found. This would allow our community to learn the difference between the species that grow in the high country, the foothills, the plains, braided rivers and along our coast. And just a little reminder, we've recently had it drawn to our attention about the significance of the biodiversity along our coast at Ashton Beach. These are special and unique aspects to Ashburton in our highly developed agricultural landscape. We believe this could be the Indigenous biodiversity focal point of the new plan. Waterway. The suggestion that exotic plants should be used alongside the waterway is disappointing. The yellow flag iris in the domain is one of the many examples of nuisance exotic weeds existing in our lakes and parks. Locally sourced wetland species are plentiful and include bulbinella, oi and rush species, ferns and various sedges, among others. This is a great opportunity to promote the extensive wetlands that have been so drastically reduced today. Grassy banks are attractive for mallards clambering out of the water, where they soil the grass berms and affect the water quality. In Christchurch, where carrick species are planted along the banks of the Avon, the mallards are discouraged and the native scaup population is encouraged. Carrick's planting also keeps the wetland edges intact. The wildlife garden. Are plans for an aviary for captive native birds, taking into account the Wildlife Act? We have seen poor management of caged birds in the domain in the past, and wonder if an aviary is appropriate for the present day. Aviaries are expensive to run properly, and today the welfare of the birds is very important and a concern of more members of the public. I've stood there trying to induce the cockatoo to chew on my cabbage tree frond, and had people saying that they think that it's pretty awful that we have a bird in a cage. The former enclosed fernery seems suitable and a much more appealing prospect to birds. Doves, pheasants and poultry wandering around dropping excreta is inappropriate. This is not a wildlife park, and these birds will be attracted to picnic areas with resultant fouling of the lawns. A high priority should really be attracting native birds and insects to this wildlife garden. Planting native species attractive to bees and butterflies, such as flax, hebe, manuka, olearia, and carokia, should be used along with species suitable for birds, which include Kophi, Pittosporum, lacebark cordyline, and Caprosma. The Wakanui School Native Restoration at Wakanui Beach, led by landscape architect who's just walked into the room, and former science teacher Val Clemens, has been a remarkable example of engaging children in native biodiversity. This was supported by the council and domain staff, who assisted with the propagation of native vegetation and support. Assisted with support. This level of contribution to native restoration could be a scene setter for future domain management that prioritises sharing education and information about eco-sourcing and propagation of native vegetation. Celebration of the Canterbury Plains landscape, highlighting the pre-development native biodiversity, is to be congratulated. Reference to a sustainable natural landscape surely applies to our intensive agricultural landscape. Innovative, productive land use has and continues to degrade Indigenous biodiversity from the coast to the high country. Native planting along waterways and fence lines with species not previously found on the plains does not reflect original Indigenous species. This exhibit, as part of the development plan, would need to emphasise the loss. It is, however, not difficult to imagine It is, however, not difficult to imagine the so-called sustainable, productive and natural rural landscape. This is what people see when they drive down State Highway 1 and 72. The promenade. Plantings of botanical interest. We need New Zealand native species to balance with the current focus. Nationally, there is an important landscaping trend to prioritise New Zealand Indigenous biodiversity when planning amenity planting such as this. There are many attractive small landscape designs using natives. An example is the koru design infilled with plants or braided river greywacke. We hope this will be given consideration here instead of the labour-intensive thirsty bedding plants. And just as a conclusion, just to remind you of these are thanks to Val, these photos. I haven't got my anything on a USB, but this is the foothills. Are you familiar? I mean, the New Zealand falcon, which does find its way to the Ashburton domain, clematis, and kowhai, the rata from up on Rhyolite Ridge. It would be nice if we could emulate some of those things down in the domain. Sorry, that's the photos. This is the high country. We're just leaping back uphill.
Sorry, Edith.
You can't hear me?
Sorry, yeah. I can hear you, but the people on the internet system won't be able to. Sorry.
Oh, do I have to sit down?
I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
Okay.
because
No,
we
that's
want.
fine. I wasn't realising I wasn't realising that it was going a bit further than the room. So this is our high country and higher country into the mountainous areas, alpine areas, and ranunculus, favourite food of tar. This is a little broom, a tiny little broom that's found near Buick's Bridge on that flat riverbed area. The plains, grey warbler. This little clematis here features out at the Harris Reserve. And this one here we found on a fence on Ferryman's Road, and its life is even though it was a biodiversity hotspot, its life is very, very precarious now. Our own native broom. This interesting little species here is Matagari, the Carnuka, of course, the Carnuka site, and Poaceta, which is our silver tussock. And the idea of a braided river theme at the domain might seem rather hard to imagine, but you could imagine having a water exhibit with a shingle and a water flowing through it. Our slightly maligned, critically endangered black-billed gulls. They were here before the buildings, the high buildings, and sometimes we have to just sort of take it on the chin when nature takes advantage of those buildings. So that's a dotterel and, of course, the ryebill. So while we're talking about recreating braided rivers, I just want to draw attention to the Oamaru domain. I just happened to be there at the weekend, and their equivalent of the Courier featured a woman talking about the development that they have in the children's area. Now, has anybody been to the Oamaru domain? Have you been to the children's area where they've got the old-fashioned square paddling pools, painted blue, and a concrete seal in the middle of it? You know what I mean. So they've employed this person, local man, wherever his name is. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Who's actually designed this? So what they're featuring, this is an elevated plan. So it's starting at the Benmore, Aviemore, and Waitaki, and it's a water feature for children to play in and to create their own floods and waterways and dams. It's an activity play that's not like the one that you see everywhere else with fountains spouting and children running and squealing. And they believe that this is really going to be well, it is, I understand, this type of play is a really successful way of creating water play for children. So I'm very happy for people to have a closer look at that, because I think that it would be really a great benefit, particularly as we live alongside one of the significant braided rivers. Might not quite equate to the Waitaki, but at least at this stage it's not impeded in the way that the Waitaki is. And there's some background information about the display by Dougal Armour. So, you know, that would be something that's really out of the square if we could develop something like that in the Ashburton domain.
Edith, are you open to questions?
I think so.
Good. Councillors, questions? Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to ask you about the native plantings. Do you see just areas of native planting, or would you like to see native planting mingled with exotics, or how do you, do you want one separated from the other, or is there, do you think they complement each other?
I could see the planting along, say, for example, Walnut Ave, and there's little patches there where, and I'm sort of looking at it, presume it's where there's an entranceway to the domain, alongside where those plantings are. I could see that native trees could be very complementary to the exotic conifers, and also I can see, if you want to structure for gardens, that the native gardens that we see around now are interesting, creative. We've got a wide variety of colours in the foliage, natural colours that sort of fit with the native theme, and they can be attractive and interesting to look at. But I would like to see a greater emphasis of this new planting on the use of native species, locally sourced where we can. And I haven't spoken particularly about the native area because I don't know what the plan is for it. It wasn't detailed at all in this plan.
Question.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Hello, Edith. You were talking about the water play in the Oamaru Gardens. Do you think that's similar to the dams and the canals that they have in the Margaret Mayhew playground in Christchurch? Have you been in?
Yes.
To there? So similar to that?
I think they are planning to have a sand base, and they also, because they're wanting to have a geo park aspect as well. So at the base of the sand, they may well find the odd fossil or two.
Oh, I see.
So it's a very natural, like they're having timber and boulders and all sorts of things like that they can create their own meanders in the waterway.
Right, thank you.
I'll leave all this with you to have a look.
Okay. Further questions, councillors? Mr. Mayor.
Yep, thanks Edith for your presentation. Just think about the aviary. You would like the aviary just gone altogether and do something else with the space.
Being idealistic, I would like to see a focus on the species that attract native birds, that it's our native birds that we should be hearing and seeing, and they attracted to the domain. I realise that this the aviaries are a structure there, and I don't know if you've looked at the birds on a hot day, or if you could find them if they're not hiding in their concrete caves. It's not really a very natural feature, but I was quite interested to go into the fernery and see Cocky, or whoever he is, the other one, hanging on the fence enjoying himself. I didn't see any native birds. They might have been native to England and the rest of the world in the form of sparrows, but I guess that if people had kakariki, which I know that a number of people around here cage, that it might be quite nice to have them in there if that's the life that lies ahead for those birds.
I know we've had a few comments today in the submissions that the aviary's seen its day.
All right.
Yeah, that
They
it's
might
not
be looking
acceptable today.
Yeah, they might be looking at the wilderness area, you know, that's full of where the goldfinches and other things feed, because that was probably a much more natural area than the concrete. However, you know, even at the Oamaru Domain, they've got, you know, quite a popular aviary, but it just sort of has more greenery and trees growing in it, that sort of thing. Like they're not stark cells.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brown, were you indicating? No? Okay. Right, no further questions? Edith, thank you very much for coming along and giving us your thoughts and your wishes for the domain. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, Mr Mayor. Thank you, staff. Now, we're here in decision mode at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Decision mode is in public, and we'll be working through issues as per these draft supplementary booklet. Look forward to seeing you bright-eyed and well tuned in to the domain.